Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Draft Room. This is the NFL Draft Podcast of the Packernet Podcast Network. Well, I did skip yesterday. I'm stupid when it comes to planning out, like, oh, tomorrow we'll do like the first day of the combine. And then it dawned on me, it's not going to be done until like 7 o'clock my time, I think it was. And I want to get these up by 5. So that isn't going to work. So, I decided, let's just put a pause on one of these and then we'll pick it up tomorrow rather than let's start from scratch and see if we can build out some more stuff to talk about and kind of force an episode. With that said, pretty big day yesterday, a lot of exciting stuff, very impressive prospects, both at the top end, which I went on a whole tirade about. We talked too much about the top end, but we're gonna spend a little bit of time, especially on one particular prospect that really impressed. But there's plenty of other prospects that are very, very interesting. First of all, as I've said, though, I want this podcast to be as interactive as possible. And, part of this is going to be, we've got a very large Facebook group with a lot of people. It's going to be about informing people that we're here and that this is a possibility and that we can, call in. And I would love for this to, I wouldn't say love necessarily, but if this became just a call-in show, I would not be mad about it. To just talk NFL draft and kind of do things that way with a little bit of, let's talk about this, let's talk about that mixed in. Maybe if it was just like a segment or something, you know what I mean? I want this to be interactive. I honestly enjoy it so much. Like I love Packernet. I really do. And when I have something that I like, tomorrow's podcast, a lot of yelling. I went off on a tangent. I enjoy that thoroughly. But there are days where it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, we just got the news and I'll go through the news and that's good. Podcast is meant to be informative and you let people know what's going on in the world, but I don't look forward to it maybe as much. Packernet After Dark, I always like. You guys steer the ship. You guys decide what to do. And I'm just kind of there going along with it. And we're just talking football and it's interactive and it's fun. So again, this will be like, this draft podcast will be just as much your show as it is as Packernet After Dark is. And if you'd rather have me flap my gums about prospects that I want to talk about, that's fine. Or call in and we'll talk about what you got going on. With that said, we do have some calls, so I want to get to those really quickly. And then we'll rip through what happened yesterday at the Combine.
Hey, this is Garrett from Southern Illinois.
What's up, dude?
I have a question regarding the Green Bay Packers and the compensatory picks that they will possibly be getting next year. Now, I know you shouldn't count your chickens before they're hatched, but with the potential of there being 3 third-round picks and 3 fourth-round picks, could Green Bay potentially trade up in the 2026 draft using their own confirmed fourth-round pick and their own confirmed third-round pick to move up in this year's draft? And what is the likelihood of something like that happening?
That's pretty interesting. I hadn't really considered that. I would say it's low, only because I think teams generally, at least the way the Packers operate, I'm guessing most teams, they don't want to be locked into any particular strategy. They want to leave themselves open. And the problem is, at that point, we have to lock ourselves into we're not going and getting free agents. At least guys that fit the compensatory formula type of guys. If they were cut or something, then that's different. A trade is different. But if they left in free agency and comport to that, the rules therein, whatever those are, within a certain date range or whatever, then we cannot pick them up. And I don't think teams necessarily want to do that. Now, with that said, there's a slight caveat, and the slight caveat is that the free agency period is before the draft. Now, obviously, it still extends beyond the draft, so you'd be closing yourself off after that, but a large portion of the moves you're going to make are going to be done. You'll have a pretty good understanding. The big free agents, they're going to be signed either by you or by somebody else. There's a good chance that by the time the draft rolls around, you look at it and say, we may sign some people. And in fact, we may need to based on what happens in the draft. It may become much more urgent. However, are there the types of free agents even available to bring on that would cancel out these, like Malik Willis or Rasheed Walker type of free agents, especially when you can see what potentially, probably they signed for. So you know more or less what that's going to mean on the compensatory formula because you've seen that compared to everybody else. You may look at it and say, this guy's going to cancel out like a 7th rounder or something. You know what I mean? I still say it's very unlikely, but I do get what you're saying in terms of we genuinely believe we're going to have a plethora of picks in 2027. And so if we did trade away 1 or 2 of those, we could maybe move up. It's definitely one of those things you put immediately in the back of your mind so that if the Packers, because usually, you trade within years. Unless it's a big package, then it's, 1 or 2 of these years, 1 of next year. But if you see the Packers trade up in the 2nd round and they trade like a 3rd round 2027 pick, that's immediately, I'm thinking to myself, oh, Garrett, good call, bro. That was a good call.
Hey, Ryan, Drew from Green Bay.
Yo.
And day 1 of the combine is over, a lot of field drills anyways, but defensive tackles. And there was a David Gusta guy who did really well at the combine. And I was able to find a little bit of film from when he was at Washington State because apparently he transferred to Kentucky. And, his athleticism definitely shows up. He's, once in a while he can get washed out a little bit, but he is like a violent guy on the field. And he cuts in on offensive linemen a lot where he can beat the blocks and get TFLs. And I think as a, maybe round 4, round 5 kind of guy, I think he could be interesting if we miss out on everybody else. And that's the kind of guy we needed to have break out, at the combine, so that if we can't get someone early, that there is at least some sort of option later. I also thought it was interesting that Lee Hunter had a horrendous day at the combine.
Yeah, I saw that.
I thought
real
anyways, bad. He's testing towards the bottom in a lot of different things and a lot of drills, and he's a Texas Tech.
And he was popular. I mean, I think I mentioned that when I was doing the 3rd round picks. What I was doing, if you didn't hear that podcast, in the 3rd round mock draft that I did, I had people in the Facebook group. I found their team mocks, and I said, okay, here's your first 2 picks, and then I'll do the 3rd one. And that's how we'll do it. He was probably, everybody thought they were getting him in the 2nd round. Assuming you were first half of the 2nd round or something. Maybe even a couple first rounders. He was probably the most popular pick of everybody. And I'm willing to bet that's going to change very much at this point. In fact, I'm seeing some Packers people saying things like, he may slide to us, and if he does, don't draft him. Type of stuff, you know what I mean? I mean, there's probably some people saying, ooh, maybe, as being excited, but I mean, the hype, again, did teams maybe anticipate this? Probably, but at least the hype as far as media and everybody else has been concerned took a freaking nosedive.
That guy. And I would still be interested in him, though. I wouldn't want to overreact to the combine on that. I think he provides a lot on tape that he shows that he can beat linemen, that he could be dominant. He does need to work on technique a little bit he leans forward a little bit and all that, and just work on getting out of his stance. But overall, I still think he's a really good player that there's something to work with there. So in the 2nd round, or, we'll see if he falls to the 3rd, but probably he'd be a 2nd rounder. So
yeah, I think so.
There are some other defensive tackles like DeMonte Capehart from Clemson had a really good day. Grayson Holton from Oklahoma had a really good day. So
yeah.
I don't know, who stood out to you? Any of those guys you like? Or, anyways, thanks for listening. Bye.
Well, I appreciate you calling in. We'll get into, I guess, my thoughts on some stuff once we get through. You got one more call here. And just a reminder, anytime you guys call in, you highlight a player or whatever, what I'll do is I'll download the audio and I will put it in their file so that, and you listed a couple people, but primarily you highlighted David Gusta. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. We'll figure that out in a second. I'll look it up. So I'll do two things. Number one, we're going to go through his scouting report real quick. That's kind of a perk of calling somebody in. I'll add that to the official Big Board scouting guide that I have put together. Link is in the description. We'll go over him a little bit, and then again, I'll save your audio for that guy. But yeah, I see here highest unofficial RAS scores from the defensive line class at the NFL Scouting Combine. Number one, DeMonte Capehart out of Clemson, a 9.97. Caleb Banks out of Florida, a 9.87. Then your boy David Gusta out of Kentucky, 9.75. Grayson Halton, who's a lot of these guys have been pretty popular. Halton's exciting because he's a guy that I've been excited about for a while. This was a check the box thing, and he checked the boxes, so it kind of stays in there. Banks, I'm kind of interested and excited to see that he did so well. I want to go back and kind of review that a little bit closer. Anyway, Zane Durant out of Penn State, a 9.2. Caleb Proctor out of SLU, a 9.13. If I didn't say it, 9.75 for David Gusta. But really quickly here, because I a lot to get to. David Gusta, Kentucky Wildcat. He was at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Do I have any notes on him? Every once in a while I get kind of surprised. I go to add some detail, and I'm like, oh, I already got this guy in here. Nope, nothing yet. He is on the consensus board right now at 230, which is a drop because last time I updated my board, he was at 208, so he's down to 230. I would presume he's going to come back up a little bit, although I've thought that about other people, and that did not happen, so we'll see. He's down below Mason Rieger, actually, who I also saw I think he had a pretty terrible combine, edge rusher out of Wisconsin. But 3-star recruit. He initially had to go to Washington State because he didn't have a lot of Power 5 interest. Redshirted in 2021 at Washington State, Gusta steadily climbed into a starting role, exploding in 2024, which was his final year at Washington State. Real quick, I'll go through the PFF. So again, 2022 didn't really play very much, 64 grade. 2023 got his first start, jumped up to nearly a 70, so pretty good. 72 run defense, 83 tackling, 64 pass rush, so the pass rush was a little lacking. Then 2024, his final year, he had an 84 grade, 79 run defense, and an 85 pass rush grade. The pressures and sacks are appalling, 29 pressures on 358 attempts and 1 sack. He's at 2 sacks in his entire career and 67 pressures on 922 attempts in his career, which is just bad. Again, the defensive tackle class, the statistics are appalling. But a lot of big dudes. He is, I don't know what his official, I shouldn't be using his unofficial weights anymore. But PFF has him at 6'3", 317. I don't know if that's from the Combine or from the East-West, but I know that's an updated weight. Anywho, 2025, he transfers to Kentucky, 76 grade, 78 run defense, 70 pass rush. Again, the pressures and sacks are not good enough, but the grades are there to where PFF thought he did a good job. Remember, you're usually getting double teams and things of that nature, so you're facing some tough stuff that you might not, especially, depending on the team you go to, see in the NFL as much. But obviously, for a guy like this, you're looking at run defense, and his 3 starts, his grades were 72, 79, and 78, so very solid there. But transfers to Kentucky January 2025, one of the portal's top interior targets, and started all 12 games at nose guard in the SEC. Game captain honors playing against Georgia. Oh, we already got the combine numbers in here. Look at this. Look at frickin' Grok on his game. 2026 Combine changed everything. A 4.88 second 40 at 308, so that's what he weighed in at. 4.88 at 308. Wow. 168 10-yard split, 32-inch vert, 37 bench reps, turning a solid rotational piece into a legitimate day 3 riser with a high floor starter trait. Says at 308 he ran a 4.88 and all the other stuff. Numbers that belong to edge rushers, not interior anchors. No one saw this level of explosiveness coming. His draft stock jumped overnight. Says at Washington State, although he had modest sack totals, he consistently collapsed pockets and freed edge players, even when the stat sheet stayed quiet. That is a critical piece here as well, because remember, if you have good pass rushers, it's also important to make sure that the quarterback has nowhere to run. If they can just step up in the pocket and then evade out the side, you don't have anything. If there is nowhere to step up, even if this guy's never touching the quarterback, if he's making sure that line at least doesn't move backwards and it ideally can push toward the quarterback a little bit, That guy is going to be responsible for a lot of sacks, even though he gets credit for none of them. Off the field, he's an anime-loving... Oh, bro! You know what that makes me think of, right, Packer fans? Who's the last guy we had that was a defensive tackle that's a big anime guy? Mike Daniels. Off the field, he's an anime-loving, spicy chili wonton cooking bone, I think that's his nickname, who calls himself a nerd yet brings violent hands every rep. Bro, that got me excited. I don't know what it is about the anime defensive tackles, man, but they're wild. No known major injuries or surgeries. Goose has been remarkably durable, appearing in all 44 career games, starting 36. That's incredible. Iron Man durability with 0 red flags. Speaking of other red flags, clean off the field profile, strong character references from multiple coaching staff, and leadership recognition as a game captain. Described as tough, understanding, and mature with no academic, legal, or behavioral issues. Spotless character. Pro-com. Armon Watts played for the Vikings, Patriots. Similar size and frame. Elite testing numbers for his size. High motor. Clogs the interior. Creates pressure with hands and power. Thrives as a rotational 1-tech, 3-tech hybrid despite modest sack total. So there you go. All right, we'll take a break. I'm going to get this added. And I'll tell you what, Drew, I think we're going to get right into the combine after the break. We'll save your other call for tomorrow's episode, if that's cool with you. So we will take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so first of all, and again, I do have a pronunciation guide in the scouting report, so this will be in there as well. According to the 2025 University of Kentucky football numerical roster, it's pronounced Gusta. I actually looked it up. You know, if you just look generally, they have YouTube things on how to pronounce certain names. This is on there, and it's like, oh, it's Gusta for sure. But according to this, it's Gusta. All right, so the entire rest of this podcast was ruined. If you want to know exactly how, it's because it all sounded a little bit like this. We'll probably skip the rest of these. There's about 25, 30 minutes of that just got ruined. So we'll probably have to shorten the podcast because I'm going to be summarizing what we talked about. I'm not going to re-record the entire thing. I mean, we'll see how long it takes, I guess, but I'm just kind of freaking annoyed with the situation. Try to keep track of the podcast and see if I notice any spiky nonsense that would indicate it's messed up again. Okay. So, let's go through the biggest storyline here is Sonny Styles. I'm so annoyed because there's such good content on here. But Sonny Styles is the guy. And I had very briefly mentioned this prior to, I don't know, 2 days ago or whatever, where there was a comment about if Sonny Styles runs well, if he performs well, he could be in that sort of Micah Parsons conversation that Arvell Reese has been put into. Well, he did exactly that. He dominated. I saw somebody recently posted like his RAS score at different positions, and it's like 10, 10, 10, 9.98. Presumably like edge, linebacker, corner, safety. 6'5", 252, ran a 4.46, which is 91st percentile, 43.5-inch vert, which is 100th percentile, 134-inch broad jump, 99th percentile. So, I honestly don't, like I said, that was kind of a new thing to me. And apparently it is a discussion with Sonny Styles. Now, the biggest takeaway, I think, more so than the edge thing, although I think it should be a major discussion, but bigger than that is the days of him being mocked to Dallas at, after pick 10, those days are over. The conversation, and I'm not saying that this is me telling you this because I don't know what's going to happen, but the conversation now is that he's not making it out of the top 5. Now, immediately I'm thinking, okay, then you kind of do think he could be a pass rusher. Maybe not, because you're talking about elite generational linebacker type of guy, but still, I think there has to be some. And I think that's kind of the point. He has the upside, and I think anybody that drafts him is going to play with that. But I think there's also rawness because he wasn't really utilized in that way. So the assumption is we might be able to make him a Micah Parsons type of player. If we can't, he is a generational linebacker prospect that we can probably still use to blitz all the time if we want to anyways, just from the inside, as well as being like a borderline safety, box safety. That's like actually like an actual linebacker, but it's like a linebacker safety hybrid type of a guy. In other words, very good linebacker, also very good in coverage, that to the point where you would think he's more of a safety type, also very good at blitzing. Now, I'm always skeptical of these types of claims. We hear this quite often, and I don't know. I don't know. The other is Arvell Reese, and Arvell Reese basically has been the Sonny Styles the entire time. Everybody kind of knew what he would do, and it would be similar. In fact, I think they both ran the exact 4.46. They're very similar type of prospects. I think it appears the Arvell Reese situation is a little bit more defined, as we believe he can do the pass rushing, whereas Sonny Styles is a little bit more, we would have to kind of try that from scratch. But again, they're kind of like the same guy. Very, very unusual situation to have two sort of generational linebacker prospects in the same draft class, coming from the same school, with the same type of measurables, roughly, that are both having this, at least flirting with Micah Parsons type conversations. Really remarkable. And also, I don't know where Arvell Reese goes. There's obviously conversations about 2. There's several guys that are in the discussions at 2. But if you're telling me Arvell Reese is going at 2, let's just say that's in your mind definitive. And Sonny Styles is not making it out of the top 5. They're so close. You can't tell me that we can't have the discussion about whether or not Sonny Styles goes first. I haven't really seen that discussion, but again, if you're telling me he's going to launch up from outside of the top 10 to a lock top 5, and Arvell Reese is also a top 5 prospect, I'm sorry, we're going to have that discussion. It's going to come up. The other topic that I talked about was sort of the short arm concerns, the biggest one being Ruben Bain. Now, you could certainly say, well, he checked it in the affirmative. In other words, he passed the test. 6'2 and a quarter with 30 and 7/8 inch arms. The sort of bare minimum threshold is 31, which is kind of hilarious because it's like, technically he didn't even reach the bare minimum threshold, but at 30 and 7/8, I guess we'll say it was 31, which puts him at the bottom of the, I guess it's technically acceptable. The average, by the way, is 33 and a half inches, so it's still well short of that. But it's going to be a knock. And the thing about Ruben Bain, he had a great college career. He was the guy nobody wanted to mess with in college football, just an absolute beast. But the sort of, and I want to believe that teams are all above this, so it's not going to matter. But if you're going off of vibes or energy, I can't see Ruben Bain. I'm not even talking about the scheme fit, which already has Bain not as the number 2, but you've got guys out of OSU that are just tearing it up. Not to mention the Texas Tech guy had a great combine. Then Ruben Bain shows up. He begrudgingly gets measured. People view him as way too short arms. And then he says, oh, and by the way, I'm not running any of your stupid drills. You got my tape. Watch the tape. Those are my words, not his, but essentially that's it. You want to know if I can play? Watch the tape. It's all there for you. I'm not doing your stupid little games. Well, obviously that just kind of signals to everybody that any concerns that you had are valid. And in the back of your mind, and this is a concern about this draft class, as we know, the top end of the talent is not really blue chip talent. Not to say that any of these guys couldn't become blue chippers. They absolutely could, including Ruben Bain, but just in terms of the grading scales, a lot of these guys do not have them as blue chip prospects. In other words, if they were in a different draft class, they would get dwarfed. And so in the back of your mind, you think about these sort of top 5 prospects, especially pass rushers. You think about the Bosas, you think about Garrett, you think about these guys that, they show up to the combine and they make an entrance. You look at Myles Garrett, that guy is a beast. He is big, he's tall, he's got super long arms, and he dominates the combine. Everybody is in awe of this human specimen. And Bain shows up and goes, you know what, shut up. I'm small, I got short arms, and I can't do all your little tricks, but I'm a good pass rusher. That's not going to inspire anything. And again, he may go very, very early. He probably goes very, very early. But if you needed a sort of an example of the situation that we're in, there you go. That's the guy who is in contention to go number 2, behind the quarterback, by the way, that everybody's putting out articles saying, please believe us that he's actually elite. Trust us. No, really, he's actually elite. He's not just this boring kind of like, he'll be good, but, it's definitely not the greatest we've ever seen quarterback prospect. No. He's actually elite. Like, okay, well, we'll see. Also in that conversation, but even worse, is Cassius Howell. Again, another mid-first round pick. He had even shorter arms than Bain. His were 30 and a quarter. So he's closer to 30 than 31. And this is a right now consensus first round pick. And the crazy thing is, if you look at the consensus board and you say, okay, well let's drop Bain and then let's drop Cassius out of the first round because he doesn't have 31-inch arms or whatever. Let's get crazy with it. The problem is you're pushing everybody down. Somebody has to get picked. We got 2 top 10 offensive tackles based on the consensus board in a draft class where, as we heard, as far as the rumors from the combine, there are no top 10 talents in this draft class. Okay, so let's see. Mendoza, I guess, gets to stay. Ruben Bain has to drop. Maui Noah needs to drop. Fano needs to drop. Jordan Tyson is not running drills and has injuries, so he's got to drop. Cassius Howell's got to drop. Can anybody get picked in the first round, or what are we doing here? But again, the exciting thing is, first of all, these are good football players, obviously. These are first-round picks. The potential here is incredible. I'm not trying to act like they're bad football players. It's just a different kind of a deal than what you've seen in the past with some guys that are just, they check every single box times 1,000. But I think it kind of flattens things out a little bit. And I think that makes the draft more exciting in terms of what I'd like to drive toward, which is looking at a draft that is 300 players long, as opposed to a draft that is like 15-ish players long, with a little bit of extra emphasis on the second half of the first round and maybe a little bit into the second round, and then after that, we just don't care. It's kind of a silly way to look at it because by the time you get into the 20s of the first round, you might as well be looking at somebody in the 50s. And even the guys inside of the top 15, how different are they than the guys at 30? Not very. If you're talking Arvell Reese, if you're talking Jeremiah Love, or if you're talking, any Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, okay, yeah, different. But, it's just not a great year to be a top 5 guy, I guess. But the other side of that is somebody in there is going to be a freak. You're just less likely to just automatically grab him. You got to get the right guy. He's in there. You just got to find that right guy. It's kind of like I've said with center this entire time. Looking at the Packers or any other team that needs a center, there's so many really talented centers that fall in that second, third, fourth round area and even beyond in some cases. Somebody is going to be a dog in that group. Somebody. I don't know who, but somebody's going to be a really good center, at least one of those guys. Who's going to find him is the question. All right, let's take a break here. I guess we will do another one. That's good. I'm still a little chatty about it. I had to take a break and go outside and get my pork belly started because I was just in a bad mood. And I'm like, bro, I got to get this started. Frickin' A. But it actually kind of works out pretty well to do it once because sometimes you stumble over things, you say wrong things, and the next time through you're like, catch yourself. Like, I won't say that again. You're 10 minutes in, you realize you've been talking about the wrong prospect. Like, damn it. Just play it cool. Like, yeah, I know about that, but it's no big deal. Oh, the tricks of the trade that you guys probably don't fall for. All right, take a break. We'll be right back. All right, we'll rip through a couple of the winners and losers here. I know we've kind of been doing that already, but just, outside of the big news. Malachi Lawrence is a big one out of UCF. Real big. Edge rusher. Where is he at on the consensus board again? This is one of those guys, by the way, if you're like me or like a lot of other people where you have a hard time trying to fall in love with some of these later round guys, third round or whatever, Malachi Lawrence is easy to fall in love with. The combine is great for that, by the way. It's a great jumping off point of you see the RAS, you see the elite numbers, and you're like, okay, I'm in. I'm down. Let's do this. He dominated the combine. 1,000%. Edge rusher, UCF, I think I said that. He's currently at consensus 96 overall. I saw somebody post a tweet. I don't know if this is going to be in agreement, but somebody who's been very high on him from the beginning is saying that, I had him rather than a top 100 prospect as a top 50 prospect, and I think it's about time people started getting on board with that. 9.9 RAS, ranking near the top in every speed and explosion category. In fact, I went through the graphic before. I'm not going to go look for it again, but in like all the metrics, he was, I think, second among all edge rushers, maybe first in one and second in all the others. So dominant numbers. Let me just see if I can find a couple little things here, because he got me excited when I was going through some of the notes. Well, here's that graphic again. This came from NFL Plus. He had the second best 40-yard dash, the second best 10-yard split, tied for the second best vertical jump, and the second best broad jump. 4.52 40, 1.59 10-yard split, 40-inch vert, and a 10-10 broad jump. First team All Big 12 conference in 2025, led UCF with 11 tackles for a loss and 7 sacks. Here's Dane Brugler. I skipped that. I already told you about the other tweet. Here's what Dane Brugler said yesterday. Malachi Lawrence, 1.58 10-yard split, matches his big-time vert and broad jump. He was already in my top 100. He's making a case to go in the top 2 rounds. So this went from a guy that, you could get 3rd, 4th round to potentially, if you don't have a first-round pick, this would be your first pick. I've seen multiple tweets about edge rushers winning at the Combine, one from Jacob Infante. There was another one earlier. Both of them had Malachi Lawrence right at the top. Another big winner, Caleb Banks, massive human being, 6'6", 327, record-breaking 85 and 3/4-inch wingspan, solidified himself as a first-rounder despite his medical concerns of having a broken foot. And then in addition to that, David Bailey out of Stanford ran a 4.54 40, firmly in the conversation for number 2 or number 3 overall pick. Again, another guy that had a good day, another guy that's potentially number 2 overall, one of probably 3, I would guess, of the pass rusher, even though it's probably been narrowed down from there. Some of the losers here, Lee Hunter, who was already discussed, disappointing 3.72 RAS, ran a 5.18 40, very poor explosion numbers, 21.5-inch vertical. Said what I had to say earlier on the call, but pretty brutal to be a 3.72 and to be a late first, early second round pick seems like a massive stretch to me. We'll see how the dust settles and what people are saying about Lee Hunter. I did a little snooping around. Nobody seems really concerned as of now, but again, let's let the dust settle a little bit. Then you've got Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle out of Ohio State, another guy that's right in that range. Lee Hunter at 35, Caden McDonald at 30, both of them defensive tackles. Apparently looked very heavy-footed, struggled with change of direction drills. It doesn't look like he did any of the other. He doesn't have an RAS. I don't think he did the 40 and all that stuff, which is not great. If you skip all that and then you go do the team drills and the report is that you look kind of heavy-footed. Similarly is LT Overton out of Alabama. Apparently he tested, not apparently, he did test very poorly, 4.87 40 at, I think he's 270s as an edge rusher. Also looked very stiff in some of the positional drills. And it's bad enough to the point that the conversation is being had, do you just bulk him up and move him inside as an interior pass rusher, which is never a fun conversation. I don't know too many times that that's happened super successfully. Not that it's, you're an edge rusher, we think you'd be better inside. It's you're an edge rusher, but you're not good enough, and so your only hope is to be inside. You're not fast enough, athletic enough, whatever. So let's just throw some extra weight on you and see what happens. It's not a great sign. And then the last thing I did, and I probably got rid of this, so I don't know if I'm even going to be able to find it now because I was done with it and I didn't need it anymore. Here it is. All right, I did save it for my notes. So Lindsey Rhodes. Lindsey Rhodes works over at Sumer Sports, and Sumer Sports obviously is doing a lot of things. They're emerging in a lot of areas. They've got a YouTube channel with a lot of interesting stuff I haven't fully checked out yet, but I need to kind of sort through that, see if there's any interesting information in there. But Lindsey Rhodes works there, apparently. And she did a big thread on X, thoughts as I leave Indy. And I just want to kind of skip through these real quick. A lot of this we already talked about. Draft class underwhelming at the top. As we know, she said there's going to be a lot of discussions about positional value because, as we've talked about a lot, the underwhelming positions are the better prospects, and the better prospects and the better positions are the underwhelming prospects for the most part. As far as quarterback, she says Mendoza's number 1. I think Ty Simpson is number 2. And then point 3, she says, I have no idea who 3 is, and it could be Ty Simpson. She said she thinks because everybody has their sort of like big weaknesses or whatever, it's going to end up coming down to an eye of the beholder kind of a situation. Talks again about Love and Downs and the positional stuff. Even says Downs is amazing, but he's not Eamon Warrior or Kyle Hamilton. So even in the elite prospect, but not elite positional value, you still are looking at it and going, yeah, I don't know about elite. Number 6 I found interesting. Actually, quite a few of these are interesting, at least as far as, I'm not exactly sure what we're talking about, but let's kind of put this in our back pocket and explore. But she says you can't copy the Seahawks D. Essentially, it's more about McDonald than trying to emulate their scheme or going out and drafting those pieces, which is interesting for a couple of reasons, some of which she'll bring up in a little bit. But, 2 years ago, everybody wanted to be the Eagles. Everybody's trying to go out and get bigger and do all this kind of stuff. And then this year, the Seahawks do something, and they're not the Eagles, but they win in a very different way. And a lot of people are saying there's no point in trying to emulate that because unless you have McDonald as your head coach, you're not going to be able to. Now, the reason I say that that's interesting is about her next points. Number 7 says, we are in an ideas era, and the ability to pivot is king. And well, let me just continue reading here. It says, we taped a Sumer Sports Show pod with Jordan Rodriguez today. It'll come out in the next few days. It's worth looking for and listening to, start to finish. No one's better at investigating and assessing the people who shape this league, and she thinks we are in the front end of an ideas era where the ability to pivot, self-scout, and completely reshape process is going to be preeminent as a skill set. She says this will play out in a number of ways. Again, I don't know what that means exactly. I have a lot of thoughts on it. But I find it interesting because, where is that other point she made? Well, that was, maybe there wasn't another one. I know there is, though. Oh, it's the very next one here. It's tight ends and safeties. It ties in, even though it doesn't seem like it does. So let me read this, too. So these 3 here kind of work in conjunction. She says, tight ends and safeties. In terms of the cycle of offense adjusting to defense, adjusting to offense, that happens all the time. The heavy tight end personnel groupings we saw this year feel like something to watch. The goal of those packages is to get the defense in a better look to pass against. Safeties will be key to combat that. Teams might decide to look at those positions as a result. So tying all these 3 things together, I feel like, and I could be wrong, it used to be that we were in eras for a long time. You would have a certain style of offense or something that would dominate for a decade before a defense figured it out and you had to adapt to that. Offenses were usually a little quicker to adapt to defenses so that they can get back on top, but then that would dominate for a decade. It feels now that we're in a much quicker, next year is something new, and the next year is something new. And so you are in this continual evolution thing. You don't have 4 or 5 years to kind of retool your entire thing. You have to be fluid, because you don't even know what's coming. You have to be not only at the forefront of it, which is always nice, because even though everybody's going to copy it within a year, you get that 1 year to be at the forefront, and everybody has to rebuild everything to try to get out there and kind of run in your scheme with your types of players and all that stuff, and most people can't execute it the way you can anyways. So you're out in front. It's good to be on the forefront. But now you not only need to be on the forefront, because if you're not, then by the time you figure it out, we've already moved on, but you have to be able to pivot and have the mobility to move around within that, or at least to understand what's happening and react to it in your own kind of a way here. And so I'm interested to see what she had to say on that, Jordan Rodriguez, because when you think about it, it does kind of make sense that the team that won this year is different than the way the team won last year, which is different than the way the team won 2 years ago. In fact, the team that won it 2 years ago doesn't even look like a good team anymore, and the team that won it last year is kind of and so we'll see what happens to the Seahawks next year or this coming year, but it just seems like the pace of things is picking up rapidly. The other thing that immediately came to mind, and this of course applies to the Packers, it has been true that a lot of teams that have been successful in the past have been successful, and they've been successful sort of dynasties by holding firm to a set of rules and laws that we adhere to. And it works out. The problem is it ends up being rigid. It has to, by definition. And if rigidity is sort of a hindrance to success, then sort of, you can look at not just the Packers, but Bill Belichick back in the day, or even the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, everybody has a process, and you strictly adhere to that process. And if you have a strictly adhered to process based on decades of rules that you lay out, how quickly are you able to pivot? And if you do start to rapidly pivot, how long before essentially you're out in no man's land and you're just not adhering to this anymore at all? And the, for example, the Ron Wolf playbook is basically just thrown in the garbage. And now we don't have, we'll try to rebuild it or something like it, but it's hard to build a structure on the fly that's going to be need to be fixed next year. So it's almost this very complicated thing where we need to have a process, but we need that process inside of it to be very mobile. And again, I don't exactly know the implications of all these things. I'll be looking for that podcast to come out to see exactly what she's talking about. But again, you can kind of see it and think, oh yeah, that does make sense. And what do you do about that? Because as the NFL evolves, you have to evolve. And, things that worked in the past maybe are not necessarily going to work today. You need to at least be open to that. She says if you need a pass protecting tackle, it's not a great year for you. Obviously sucks because there are a lot of teams that desperately need tackle. And, what that may do is when you're on the fence with these sort of their tackles, but we're going to kick them inside kind of thing, those guys might get legit shots at tackle because there is a lack of premier tackle prospects. So you may have guys that get drafted at least getting shots at tackle, whereas maybe they wouldn't in other situations. So, I guess the other one is that apparently Carolina is very well respected right now. I thought that was interesting because they haven't been for a while, but the Panthers are well thought of around the league. Their process seems sound. I think their offseason will be very interesting to keep an eye on. They made the playoffs, but they're not yet knocking on the door. Offense 26th in EPA per play. I think it's imperative they don't overestimate where they are in their build. I agree. They can't throw a ton of money around in free agency to make a run now. I agree. They need to be intentional about building a solid foundation, in my opinion. I think that's all entirely true. You're very close, but keep building. Don't start throwing Hail Mary passes. We're not close enough to the end zone yet. So obviously great news for Panthers fans. I didn't even do this on the last one, but I'll go ahead and read it. She says, the combine events are and are not important. We have way better ways of assessing athleticism. Sumer Sports alone has the ability to pull frame-level data related to tracking from every play for every player in every game. We can score how players did in a variety of different traits all at one time. We have 16 different traits we are consistently evaluating running backs for. For instance, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about, and I didn't necessarily know they had this, but I knew they were at least working in this direction. But the level of technology that is out there, teams not only can just judge straight line speed, they can judge different types of speed in different situations. Again, speed off the line, speed, blah, 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 right? All these different things that you can do. Who gives a crap about a 40 time? She goes on to say, so we know how fast players are on the field and how their speed changes depending on the route. We know whose shiftiness sends tackle probability plummeting. We know whose get-off is bonkers and who can sustain blocks. And those data points tell a better story than the 40 or the vertical jump or the bench press. But, she says, more data is always good. And combine data is the only trait-driven data that we can track back historically. Teams want to know how current players profile compared to similar players in 1993, 2004, etc. Combine events provide a controlled environment by which to make those comparisons. By the way, that is a temporary thing because all the data they're talking about is new because the technology is new. But it's not going to take very long to move out forward enough for that to be not true. Also, these companies have the ability, if they so choose, to go backwards. Like PFF did. They created PFF and then they went backwards in time and started grading some seasons. I don't do that anymore, I don't think. But you can. And so if Sumer Sports wanted to, for example, and provided it to NFL teams or whatever technology they're using, they could use the technology, they could run the film through it, as much film as they can get their hands on, to create a database to make the combine even more useless. But in the meantime, it's beneficial to say, here is the 40, the vert, the three cone. And so it builds an athletic profile. And it's one that all these guys are familiar with because all these scouts, first of all, scouts, GMs, whatever, these are old timers. These are guys that have been doing this since the 80s, since the 90s, whatever. They've been doing this a long time. They never had all this fancy schmancy technology. They had the combine, they had 40 times, they had freaking you still got these guys using stopwatches. So not only are they resistant to the technology and over-reliant on bad data, but they have it's something that they're comfortable with, that they understand. So when they see all this stuff, they say, you know what that reminds me of? Back in '07, there's a kid out of BCD University, and he can't, you know what I mean? Like it builds a profile in their own brain. But as the NFL rapidly transforms, especially technologically, so will the people. Because the guys, the scouts and whatnot that are going to end up being more successful are the guys that lean on these things more. The ones that are more resistant to it are the ones that are going to fall behind. And then these databases are going to continue to grow. And, you know, what happened in 2004 in comparing his 40 time and all that, when you run the numbers, you're going to find that it doesn't matter. The correlation with combine numbers is going to be useless information. Maybe it'll be decent in terms of like cutoffs, you know, receiver ran a 4.76. Well, okay, you probably can't hang. And you're probably right. And maybe you just throw them off your board. But outside of stuff like that, it doesn't freaking matter. There's so much, like she said, there's so many thousands and thousands and thousands of data points. This is one more data point among thousands. Think about all the different data points that you can have just on a given play. These guys run hundreds of plays. They do hundreds of snaps per year over 4 or 5 year careers with, you know, multiple, on some instances, multiple data points per. Just based on speed alone, you can do that. Not to mention the route running, in the route tree, in the hands, the vision, whatever. So, anywho, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I appreciate all of you. Please get your calls in. I'm going to go ahead and throw on the combine. I'm going to work on, you know, as I said, updating my board. I still have to do After Dark, but between After Dark and Pork Belly and whatnot, I should be set for the night to be able to hang in and get some work done. So, appreciate y'all. Love you guys, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.